Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush. And please welcome back to the channel Mr. Davey Cretin, now of Cretin Classics, his very own channel. Davey, thanks so much for coming back on the channel. Really pleased to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Bicycle Legs. I appreciate it.
And today, I can't believe we're 16 episodes into this series and we haven't got to this album yet. It's pretty incredible. So, Davey, if you could please tell my viewers which album you've picked for me, a little bit of the background behind that album, and most importantly, why you picked this album for me.
Okay, we're doing one of the big ones, one of their classic albums. It's actually their second biggest seller here in America, and it is the classic 1976 album, 2112. Woohoo! We each have a CD of it. There's the red star on the back cover, and a reference for Daniel, the famous kimono picture. Kimono My House, as one of your favorite bands, Sparks, would say.
Yes.
But at any rate, so this album came out in March of 1976. It was Rush's fourth album, and they had just completed the touring cycle for their previous album, Caress of Steel. And unfortunately, that was not a great tour for them. They ended up nicknaming it or calling it the Down the Tubes Tour because their ticket sales were down, their album sales were down. Caress of Steel sold less copies than Fly By Night, the previous record, and they were almost ready to throw in the towel. And their manager at the time, actually the manager basically throughout their whole career, Ray Daniels, spoke to the record company who was going to drop them, and the record company offered them one more album to have a hit and to make it big with. And the album they made in secrecy. They did not play a note for the record company. They would not let anyone hear it until it was finished, even their manager, Ray Daniels. And that album is 2112, second biggest selling album here in America. It's sold triple platinum, over 3 million copies when it was last certified. Their only bigger selling album is Moving Pictures from 1981, one of the classic Rush albums. And this is one of my favorite albums, but because Rush is one of my favorite bands, it's hard to say where exactly it sits in my ranking. I guess top three, but it rotates between Farewell to Kings, 2112, Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves, maybe a few others, but I digress. Came out in March 76. It was produced by Rush and their fourth member, unofficial fourth member, Terry Brown. And I've chosen this album because it is one of the classic Rush albums and one of my favorites.
Well, thanks for that. As I say, I'm so surprised that it's taken this long in this series for somebody to give me 2112. It's like people wanted to give me the more obscure albums rather than the classics. It took a while to get to Moving Pictures too. So it's just one of those things. But I'm glad that you gave it to me because it pretty much sort of completes my early Rush segment now. So it's an interesting album because, as you say, this was their sort of last chance album. And they were told to go away and do something commercial.
Which they did not.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because on one side you do have the side-long epic, but then on side two you have these 5 more concise songs. So it's kind of got a foot in each camp, doesn't it?
But it's not really commercial top 40 radio fare.
No, no. So let's get into it. We'll start obviously with the side-long epic that is 2112. We'll go through it sort of section by section.
Okay.
And it starts off with the overture, which starts off with some very sort of sci-fi synth sounds. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are the very first keyboards you ever hear on a Rush album, aren't they?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah. So you get these really sort of sci-fi synth sounds that really set you up for what is very much a sci-fi epic. And then you get this real sort of staccato riffing, which I really do love, where they play sort of dun, 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 dun. I really like that. Um, it's really hard to do too. I used to play a long time ago in like just sort of garage bands. We never played in front of people or anything. And doing those stop start bits are really difficult to get everybody exactly on time.
In sync. What instrument did you play? I didn't know you played any
Oh,
instruments.
I play a little bit of a few things and none of them very well, but I play a little bit of guitar and bass, and then I picked up some drums later on, but I was never very good at any of them.
Okay.
But yeah, and then you get I always love it. The thing I love about these Rush epics, and I sort of first sort of came across this when I did Farewell to Kings, is when they would do these epics, they would, have this sort of like 4 or 5 minutes of just instrumental playing at the beginning. And I'm a big fan of Rush in their instrumental form. Like I love, Leave That Thing Alone and YYZ and things like that. But yeah. And then we get a number of the themes in this overture that we'll get throughout the album, which is a very prog rock thing to do. Sort of,
Yes.
show bits that you'll have later on in the track, as it were. And then it comes to this very quiet sort of conclusion with the single line of words in the overture, and the meek shall inherit the earth. So yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
I wrote some notes for this section.
Yeah.
I wrote that it sets the stage for the rest of the song, the overture, as you said, and it's an ARP Odyssey synthesizer played by Hugh Syme, who did the artwork on a lot of Rush album covers. He was also a keyboard player, and it is
Mm.
the first time that they utilize keyboards on their records, where you could actually hear it. And this came out a year before Star Wars did, and the whole intro, it sounds like you're traveling through space, preceded the whole science fiction fad with Star Wars and then Star Trek and everything else that came in the 80s. So Rush were there first. They were the progenitors, you might say. And this is a song, it's a song about a futuristic society where a sort of totalitarian regime rules over the planet, and individualism is sort of stamped out, and it's a collective instead of individuality. It's the priests of the temples of Syrinx. It's their way or the highway. If you don't fall in line, then something happens to you, and who knows exactly what that is. And 38 years later, you could sort of say certain parts of the world, there are some political parallels with this album. A dystopian future, which some would say we might be in now. Some might not say that. I don't want to derail the conversation and
Mm.
go off on a separate sidetrack as our buddy Grant would do. So I'll get back to the album here. Neil Peart wrote all the lyrics for this. And after he wrote the lyrics to the song, he realized, oh, this seems a little familiar sounding to me. It reminds me of that book I read by Ayn Rand called Anthem. So what he did on the album was he said, well, I don't want to get sued, so I'm just going to say thanks to, I'm acknowledging the genius of Ayn Rand in this song. So they were
Yeah.
okay. They didn't get sued. Everything was okay with that. Let's see, what else do I have here? And what I wrote down was this section, as you said, ends with the hopeful words, quote, and the meek shall inherit the earth, end quote, which gives you hope that something good will come out of this at the end, but we'll get to that later. So
Yeah.
those are my notes on this particular instrumental. And
Yeah.
musically, it's great. Like you said,
Yeah.
staccato riffing, the lead guitars of Alex, the powerful drumming of Neil Peart. And of course, the great thing about Rush is that because it's only 3 instruments, you could hear the bass. In a lot of bands like Dream Theater, for example, unfortunately, the way they record, a lot of times the bass is just buried in the mix. And here, Geddy Lee is right there, right
Yeah.
powerfully, right in the middle of the mix. You can hear him, pardon me, very well.
Yeah. So now we get into like the Temples of Syrinx section, which is where we really sort of get the setup for what this whole piece is going to be like. Um, we get, the sort of a description of the world that our hero lives in, as it were. And as you said, it's this sort of, it's not just a totalitarian sort of regime, but it's a theocracy. It's priests who are in control. Um, they boast of their society. Geddy's using his very highest sort of shrieking vocals when he's portraying the priests. Um, this section is very riffy. It has sort of like double time in the verses and sort of half time in the choruses, which is a trick that Rush used quite a lot, especially in their earlier music. There's a short classical guitar bit at the end, and then it leads up to like a full stop before we get into the next section. Like the piece comes to a complete halt at the end of Temples of Syrinx.
Yes. So the overture and this song, the Temples of Syrinx, were always played basically almost every tour throughout their whole career. Once they released this in 1976, this was the chunk of the album that they always played in concert and the fans got into. And it's when Geddy portrays the priest, as you said, with his high falsetto voice there, it's almost a threat the way Neil wrote the lyrics, quote, "We've taken care of everything, the words you read, the songs you sing," end quote. The way I look at it, it could almost be seen as a threat. Do what we say or else. We're in charge, we're the rulers, we're the priests. You do what we say.
Yeah.
And it's just a great musical piece, and just life's in shreds on guitar throughout this whole 20-minute epic, especially here.
Oh, absolutely. This whole piece, like the whole sidelong epic, to me is musically, it is like a showcase for Alex Lifeson. Absolutely a showcase for him. But yeah. So then we get into Discovery, and I'll give a little bit of a background into how I actually do these Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush, and how I sort of listen to the albums, because I always listen to them several times before I sort of take my notes and all that sort of thing for the show. But the very first time I listened to an album for this series, I don't have the lyrics in hand or anything like that. I just put the music on, whether it's Spotify or CD or whatever. I just put the music on, sit down and listen. And I'm mostly listening to the music. I'm not paying as much attention to the lyrics on the very first listen. Second, third, fourth listen, then I've got the lyrics in hand or on my phone or whatever, and I'm paying attention to the lyrics. But the very first time, it's just a listening experience for me. So when this bit starts off with like 30 or 40 seconds of Alex tuning his guitar, I was like, what's all this about? Why have they left this in? But then, on the future listens, as I'm reading the lyrics and I'm getting more into the piece, I realize what's going on. You have our hero in this little cave that he likes to go to, and he discovers a guitar. And the tuning up is him just kind of fiddling with it and learning how to use it, as it were. And the tuning slowly gets into this sort of very nice playing from Alex. And as the piece goes on, the playing gets a little different, and it gets a little quicker and a little more competent, as it were. It's a really clever way that they've done the music to fit in with the theme of the lyric in this section, which is, our hero discovers this guitar and he makes his own music, and he thinks, wow, what a brilliant discovery. I have to share this with the priests and with everybody. He's so excited about this, that he's found this music that's different from the state approved version, as it were. There's very atmospheric playing from Alex, which leads into a crunchy end and some really great fills from Neil towards the end of this section, I think.
You basically said what I was going to say, except for one thing, we meet our protagonist here, and throughout the piece, he's called Anonymous because of the notes on the record. It's signed Anonymous 2112. the year he wrote his notes in. So I always called the protagonist Anonymous. And like you said, by a waterfall in a cave he likes to go to, he discovers what is an old acoustic guitar. And he starts fiddling around with it, playing with it. And he starts making his own music and thinks, I have to show the priests this. This is great. Everyone could learn this music and they'll hear my music and behold its great wonders.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we get into section 4, presentation. And this is where he goes to the priests and he plays his guitar for them, thinking he's going to, that this is going to be a revelation to them and all this sort of thing, only to get completely shot down in flames. Where they basically say, yes, this is old stuff, this is ancient stuff, the elder race knew about it and it brought them down, get away with it, this is folly, go away. And he's, I love, again, this section, you have the contrasts of the quieter music and the quieter lower register singing from Geddy as he's playing our hero, and then the really amped up guitar and the high pitched vocals of Geddy as the priests with the anger in their, voice saying, be gone with you, and that sort of thing. There's a great solo from Alex towards the end and it's playing the chords of the Temples of Srinix section. And yeah, that solo actually has a bit of a Brian May feel to it to me. So that's just one of those, because I notice sometimes Alex, he'll play, have a feel of certain other guitarists. I'm not saying he copies or anything, but obviously he loves other guitar players. So,
Yes.
and but this one definitely has a bit of a Brian May feel to it, but it's a searing solo. It's absolutely wonderful. So yeah, that's my thoughts on presentation.
Yeah, that's basically what I had down in my notes. But a couple of things. Like you said, he's influenced by Brian May, also Jimmy Page. I have this later
Mm.
on in my notes. It's the way that Alex Lifeson orchestrates his guitars. He builds them by layer. In a later song on the album, I have how he layers the acoustic guitar as a rhythm, as a bed, and then he puts the electric rhythm guitars, and then he does a lead over that. So a lot of times on Rush albums, he has 3 or 4 guitar tracks going on at once, which of course is hard to represent live. But yeah, he was definitely influenced by Brian May, Jimmy Page, Clapton, everyone else, all the old school great guitar players from the late 60s and early 70s, which of course they covered Clapton and Crossroads Cream song on the Feedback EP. Are you
Yeah.
planning on doing the Feedback EP?
Yes, in fact, I think I'm doing that next month with Davey Gallagher. So
Okay, no,
yeah.
okay, but I'm going off on another tangent like our
Yeah, that's
friend
all
Grant.
good.
Sorry about that.
No, 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 that's
So
fine.
like you said in this section, the dichotomy between the mellow anonymous vocals and the beautiful music underneath it, underpinning it, just is so different than when the priests get angry at him, and then it's the screaming guitar with sort of like feedback, and it's amped up and just powerful, and they're shouting him down and saying, don't annoy us further, we have our work to do, leave us alone with your foolishness.
Yeah.
We know about this, it's garbage, and our way is the way.
Yeah, and that end section in the notes on the actual album, like there's little notes before each section, sort of filling in extra detail. And that like end section is supposed to be emblematic of the priest smashing up his guitar.
Exactly.
So then we get into section 5, Oracle, the Dream. We're back into sort of atmospheric music here, as our hero has a vision of how things were and how things could be in the future. The Oracle shows him these things, shows him the elder race, shows them that they still exist, but that they've been exiled from the Solar Federation. So yeah, and he gets this idea of how life could be in a more individualistic society, as it were. I love the music in this because it's really sort of atmospheric, and again, it builds up, each section, it sort of builds up as it goes along. And I really like that about it, but it's a lovely section.
I agree.
Yeah.
I wrote, as Anonymous heads home from his bad encounter with the priests, an oracle shows him visions of the future and the past. He sees the ancient society before the Solar Federation arose and took over. Individual creativity was encouraged and works of great beauty were created. Under this ancient society, people were happy with their freedom. The elder race were not killed off by the priests. They left and eventually wanted to return to destroy them.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote for that section.
It's interesting, this whole piece though, 2112, because I think, the whole idea of a totalitarian regime who sort of, bans rock and roll or bans music or that sort of thing. That's become in this day and age a little bit of a cliche. You think of things like Dream Theater's The Astonishing, and there's been a bunch of other sort of concept pieces along those lines. But this was really one of the very first to sort of tackle that subject, and the idea of music being banned, or creativity being banned, or rock and roll being banned. Yeah. So we get into the soliloquy, the section 6. And again, the thing I love about this one and the discovery section is, as well as being very quiet, and they sort of start off after the previous section has come to a complete stop. The first noises you hear in both discovery and soliloquy are the waterfall. You hear the trickling of the water in the background. Our hero feels hopeless at this point, although he's seen these visions. He feels like this cannot be in the current situation under the priests. The despair gets too much for him, and Geddy wails his despair in that part. And Alex follows suit with an absolutely lyrical solo in this section. And then our hero leaves us. It's all too much for him. He ends it all, which is, really quite sad.
It is. This is my favorite part of the whole song, Soliloquy. I just love the music, the bed of music underneath Geddy's vocals. I just think it's beautiful, and I love singing along with it. It's my favorite part. And I wrote, that's my favorite part of the epic song. Depressed by everything he's discovered, Anonymous returns to the cave where he found the guitar, and he's so depressed about everything, he eventually takes his own life, which is what the lyrics at the end mean when he says, "My lifeblood spills over."
Yeah.
And I just think it's the best part of the song. And going back to what you said about the previous section about rock and roll being banned and individuality, being banned, also Styx, the album Kilroy, was here.
Yeah.
7, 8 years later after this, in 1983, touched on that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then we get the grand finale, which lives up to the title. It is absolutely epic and energetic. The music sounds triumphant despite the sort of despair we've had at the end of the soliloquy. We've lost our hero, but the music sounds quite sort of triumphant. And then you get the declaration at the end, the attention all planets of the Solar Federation, we have assumed control. Now, to me, that could be taken one of two ways. It could either be, the vision that he had in the Oracle, where the elder race come back and they overthrow the priests. Or it could be the priests themselves reasserting control over the Solar Federation. So it's kind of an ambiguous ending, isn't it, to the piece? And it could be taken either way.
Well, Geddy Lee always said they left it open to be ambiguous, sort of like Queensryche did with Operation Mindcrime.
Yeah.
Dream Theater sort of did with their concept album, Scenes from a Memory, Metropolis Part 2. It's almost like a cliche now, as you said. But what I wrote about this piece, this is the ending instrumental after the suicide of Anonymous. And I always thought it was ironic that after he took his own life, some kind of alien invader takes over the rule of the priests. And like I said, Lee always said they left the ending open, but in an interview with Neil Peart in 1991, he said that it was the elder race coming back to overthrow the priests. So if our hero had just held on for a little longer, he would have seen the utopia that he envisioned.
Yeah.
Is the way that I always took it. And I just read when when Neil Peart was interviewed, that he said it was the elder race coming back. I just thought it was a different alien invader.
Yeah.
But it was the elder race coming back.
I did have one question, and that is, who actually does the announcement at the end of the grand finale? Because it doesn't sound like Geddy.
I think it's Neil with his voice tinkered with in the studio, we'll put it.
Oh, okay.
I think it's him, but I'm not 100% sure. So if someone knows, definitely say it in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do let us know. Yeah. So then we get on to side 2. And as I said, side 2 is a completely different beast, because what we have here is 5 different songs, and they're all under 4 minutes long. So, 5 very concise songs. And it starts off with a passage to Bangkok. And this song made me giggle a bit at first, because this song's clearly about drugs. It's clearly about marijuana and that sort of thing, and basically going on a tour to sample all these different marijuana, from various different parts of the world and all that sort of thing. I love the main riff in the verses. Like, it may even be one of Alex's best riffs. That love it. The chorus is really catchy. The only thing that I say about this song, sort of slightly negative, is I do wish they hadn't put in that sort of really cliched Chinese little, it could have done without that. I feel like that's a bit cheesy and didn't need to be there.
But it is hooky.
Yeah. And Alex lets rip an absolutely rocking solo on this song.
And I wrote down, to offset the seriousness of side 1, they started out with sort of almost a joke song, where who knew at the time, but everyone always thought, oh, Rush, they're very studious. They're all married. They don't have groupies. They just read books when they go to the hotels, when they're on tour. But if you read Geddy's new autobiography, My Effin' Life, he says that they used drugs. Everyone did back in the day. It was the 70s. Yeah. And Alex in particular was a big weed guy. And I've been listening to the album a lot recently over the past few months. And when my girlfriend comes in, she said, you're playing that weed song again. And we have a laugh about it, because she always seems to come in when I'm listening to A Passage to Bangkok. Well, this song, I'm sorry, what?
No, I was just going to say, with the drug sort of thing, is that I remember I just recently watched the 2010 documentary Behind the Lighted Stage, and Geddy, when he's talking about the previous album, Caress of Steel, he said that they were all pretty high when they made that album.
Okay. So. I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah.
So what I love about this song is it talks about the pleasures of marijuana in a simple, veiled context. I love at the end of the song, right before the ending, there's a little bass flourish by Geddy that he plays very high up on the bass. And then Alex comes in with this little lead guitar. I think those make the song right by the end of the song. And I always look forward to those 2 little parts.
Yeah.
But it's a great, catchy song.
It's definitely a palate cleanser, if you like, after the seriousness of side 1.
Yes.
But then we get the Twilight Zone, which to me is a sort of a lyrical homage to that wonderful sort of 60s TV series. I always loved the Twilight Zone. The verses are a shuffle, which is really unusual for Rush. I don't think I've ever really heard them play a shuffle rhythm on any of the other albums that I've listened to. it's a lovely moody chorus. I love how it gets into this different mood when you get into the chorus, you know. Um, it suits the subject matter. Um, I love Neil's sort of off-kilter drumming in the choruses too. Um, we get both sides of Geddy's voice in this song to great effect. You know, he's really sort of uh wailing in the verses, and then he gets into this lovely sort of moody lower register vocal in the choruses. And another tasty Alex solo at the end. So this this might be there's one other that it might be, but this one might be my favorite song on side two. So
Nice. And I wrote down that this was the last song written for the album. They still had a few minutes to fill. So they came up with this song. And it's basically Neil's interpretation of Rod Serling's classic TV show of the same name, The Twilight Zone. And it's based on two specific episodes. And I remember those episodes, especially the one where the guy behind the counter of the diner takes off his hat and he has three eyes. He has a third eye on top of his head. And his lyrics say, beneath his hat, the strangeness lies. Take it off. He's got three eyes. And that's
yeah.
right from the episode. Very creepy episode. But then most of them were, if not all of them. So. And like you said, I wrote, it's a slow burn tune with a sublime Lifeson solo to end it.
Yeah.
And it's a very good track.
So then we get Lessons. And I have a question with this one too, because this one is written music and lyrics by Alex. Is this the only lyric he ever wrote for the band, or like?
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of it's you know, it fades in and it's mid-tempo with a sort of mix of acoustic and electric guitar. The chorus is a bit crunchier. And Geddy sings so high in the choruses, you know, it's just like off the charts. You know, the lyric has some good lines. It's not really a lyric that tells a story. It's more one that paints a picture, a bit of a mood. And yet again, another really tasty solo at the end. You know, Alex's soloing on this whole album is just masterful, I think.
Which is what a lot of Rush fans in the 80s missed once they got into their keyboard phase. They wanted the old crunchy, heavy Alex Lifeson guitar sound, and he was on to different sounds, textures, great melodic bass playing by Geddy Lee throughout this song, and it really stands out. And I wrote a rare Rush song entirely composed by Alex Lifeson. It's my personal sleeper song on the album. It's the one that never gets airplay, no one ever talks about, but it's a great underrated song. There's a part in the second verse where all of a sudden Neil goes on, I think it's his hi-hat, and I just love that part of the song. That's the part in this song that I wait for, because I just love when he goes, it's my favorite part of the song. I love that. Sorry, I'm getting a little excited.
No, that's all good.
And this is where I wrote what I said before when you brought up Brian May. I said how Alex layers the guitars, the acoustic, then the electric rhythm, then the leads on top. And I wrote down Brian May, Jimmy Page, and Clapton. This is where I was going to say that.
Yeah.
So it's a really good song, very undervalued by the fans and probably by the band. They definitely never played this one live.
Yeah. Well, it might have been difficult with all those layered guitars.
Yes. And as an opening band at the time, they only had so much time to play.
Well, that's true too. So then we get Tears. Now, this is a ballad. Those who've watched my whole series know that I have a bit of a mixed feeling about Rush ballads. I've loved some of them. I have really not liked some of them. This one I really, really do like.
Nice.
It's moody, and that's what I like about it. And the other thing I absolutely love about this one is it has lashings and lashings of Mellotron on it. I am a sucker for Mellotron. So absolutely love it. We got it has a bit of a moody blues feel to it, this track, you know.
With the Mellotron, yes.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
It's got a really tender vocal from Geddy. So, especially with those early albums, this is a side of him you haven't seen very much of, where he's doing
Correct.
that really tender vocal. It's a nice lyric from him too. It's really quite emotional. So, yeah. I mean, this one is probably the one other than the Twilight Zone that might compete to be my favorite on side two. So, yeah, I really, really like it.
Oh, it's a great song. I've always loved it. And the Mellotron, once again, is played by the guy who did the album cover artwork and a bunch of their album covers. Hugh Sime plays Mellotron on this track. And I wrote down a sad love song written entirely by Geddy, the music and the lyrics. And this has always been one of my top 5 favorite rock ballads for now close to 40 years, I would say. And I
Yeah,
love this song too.
yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's sweet and simple, so I didn't even write that much about it.
Yeah. And then it closes with Something for Nothing, which starts with this really nice arpeggiated guitar and melodic bass. It's really one of my favorite sort of Rush things when they do that sort of thing with the guitar and the bass. Um, it's another one of these songs where you've got a lot of contrast. You've got contrast between the quiet parts with the riffy parts. You've got the half time with the double time. You've got Geddy's gentle vocals versus his aggressive vocals, you know? It's got all those different flavors, all within a song that's just under 4 minutes long. Um, have I mentioned how good Alex's soloing is on this album? Because yet
Yes.
again, he absolutely nails it on this. Um, the lyric is about having to put effort into sort of achieving your dreams and doing the things that you really want to in life. It's a great album closer. I really, really like it.
Yeah, I wrote down starting out with a mellow melodic groove, the song soon develops into a hard rock juggernaut featuring searing power chords and shrieking squeals and solos from Alex. The song, basically about free will and decision making, was inspired by graffiti that Neil Peart saw when the band was driving to a concert in LA. He saw graffiti that had 3 words. It said, "Freedom isn't free." And that just stuck in his mind. And eventually he used it to base this song, the lyrics upon it. And I wrote down what you said, more great melodic bass playing by Geddy Lee. And what I said before, the fact that they were a power trio gave him a lot of room to move. And it's a lot of songs like this one. Seems like he's dancing up and down the frets on his bass guitar.
Yeah,
And he's just very melodic. He was inspired by McCartney and Chris Squire from Yes, whose shirt I'm
yeah,
wearing, one of his favorite bass players. And he's just a great amalgamation of the two of them. The greatness and the melody of McCartney and just the great playing of Squire that's just
yeah.
roots every song and just it's just a powerful sound, especially
Could
with
you?
the Rickenbacker, just like Chris Squire from Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and McCartney in later years, like in the sort of
Yes.
the 60s, McCartney was playing a Rickenbacker bass in the studio. So, could you really base yourself on two better bass players than McCartney and Squire? I mean, just brilliant.
Maybe John Entwistle of The Who, I would add to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Another great bass player.
yeah.
Could I
So,
just add a could I just
yeah,
add a couple of facts about the album that I
yeah,
neglected to
sure.
say? Uh, it reached number 61 on the American Billboard Top 200 album charts, and it reached number 5 on the Canadian charts. And as I mentioned before, it's triple platinum in the States, double platinum in Canada. And I know it
Yeah.
probably didn't chart in your country because in Australia, they didn't really have any kind of profile at all.
No, that they didn't, which is why I never really got exposed to them in the first place. But it's funny, isn't it, that it only got to 61 on the Billboard chart and yet it's triple platinum. It's a real slow burn of an album, isn't it? Like
Yes.
the sales of it. They took a while to really build up. But obviously it was a huge step up for them. You know, the 2112 suite is definitely a step up from Fountains of Lamneth from Caress of Steel. Because even though this one does have distinct sections, Fountains of Lamneth really did feel like sort of 5 or 6 short songs that they'd sort of stitched together
Put together.
Frankenstein
Yes,
style. Whereas this had, 2112 has more of a flow to it.
I agree. This is
Um,
my favorite Rush epic, 2112.
yeah. I feel like they would, you know, I don't know which one I like better or not, but I think that they would continue to develop that ability to make their epics flow on Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. But then after Hemispheres, they never really did. Well, I mean, they did the camera eye on moving pictures, but they never really did those long, long songs again.
Nope, that
So,
was the last one.
um, so there you have it, folks. Those are our thoughts on 2112. It's an album I really enjoyed, and I definitely will be going back to more and more. Where would I
Excellent.
rank it so far in the
Yeah.
catalog? It would definitely be in the top third, I think, of the Rush albums that I've listened to.
Okay, that's good.
It's
I'm
definitely
happy.
right up there.
Excellent.
Um,
Thumbs up.
yeah. So thank you so much, Davey, for introducing me to this album. It's been absolutely wonderful. For all of my viewers, please do check out Cretin Classics. It's a new channel. Davey does wonderful work there. I will leave a link to that in the description so that you can all go there and give him a sub and go and watch some of his videos. I'm sure he'd really,
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Bicycle Legs.
Yeah. Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. Everything's playlisted. So if you want to look at some of my other Bicycle Legs Discovers Rush episodes, there's a playlist for those. If you want to look at some of my Studio Albums Ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my appearances on other channels, and I do believe I will be having an upcoming appearance on Davey's channel, I also have a
Yes.
playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a dedicated Bicycle Legs Facebook page. Links all in the description. Please come and give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.